Hi everyone, Suzanne here. I hope you're all well and welcome to Sew Custom. Today's video is how I pattern a wrap bodice. So I'll start off with the basic pattern. I'll show how to remove gape from along that centre front. I'll then do a little bit of dart manipulation so that you can change up your basic pattern to give you a few other designs. So if you're interested in seeing how I do it, then let's get started. So I'm starting with some standard parcel paper. I folded it in half to give me a centre line. I'm using my basic woven block, lining it up with that centre line and tracing. I'll leave the link to the tutorial I followed to draft this block in the description box. So making sure I'm adding in all of my markings, my darts, the apex point, and now to draw in my dart legs. So that's my block traced, and off camera I'll repeat that exercise again to transfer to the other side. So now on to the patterning. So I want to draw myself a straight line from the neck shoulder point right down to the edge of that dart. And for this pattern I only need that left hand side. So that's the wrap shape created, and I've cut it out in fabric and pinned up those darts. And if I sew this up as it is and pop it on Angela, you'll see that that centre front gapes out quite a bit across the chest. So to complete this pattern I need to remove that gape, and to do that I need to pinch out some of that fabric on the upper bust and below. So back to the flat pattern. So I'm going to draw myself two lines from the apex to the centre front, and as I said, one above and one below the chest. So I'm going to start with the upper line. I'm going to cut from the centre front to the apex, opening up my shoulder dart, overlap on the cut line, removing the excess into the shoulder dart, making sure everything's lying nice and flat, and once I'm happy, sticking everything in place. Now to do exactly the same thing on that second line. So cutting from the centre front to the apex, opening up my waist dart this time, overlapping on my cut line, just by about 5mm or so, transferring the excess into that waist dart. So now I just need to correct that centre front. So I've given myself some fresh paper in underneath, and I'm just drawing a straight line from the neck point right down to the waist. Removing that excess paper, I'll also fill in those gaps on my darts, which you can see here. And just so that you guys can see a little bit more clearly the result of removing the gape, I've cut this amended pattern out in fabric, pinned up my darts, and this is how it now looks on Angela. So hopefully you can see that that centre front line now lies nice and close to the chest. So that completes the very, very basic wrap bodice. Now to get a little bit more creative. So say I didn't want to have any darts at the waist, and I wanted to add a little bit of detail at the shoulder, and that detail coming in the form of gathers. I would need to first of all close the dart at the waist and remove its fullness into that shoulder dart. So cutting along one of those dart legs from the waist to the apex, doing exactly the same thing on the shoulder dart, giving myself a little hinge, then laying one dart leg over the other at the waist, which in turn then opens up that shoulder dart, making sure everything's lying nice and flat, and once I'm happy, sticking everything down. So now to give myself a nice smooth curve across the shoulder, so using my hip curve ruler here to do that, but you could just do this by eye. And to give myself enough room to gather, I'm going to pop a little dot about an inch or so away from what was my dart legs, measuring how much I need to gather and recording that measurement on my pattern. So that completes this wrap dress bodice pattern with shoulder gathers. And here, as they say on Blue Peter, is one I made earlier. I used this same technique to create this pattern. So to amp up the creativity just a little notch further, instead of gathering the shoulder, I've sheared it. I've uploaded a video on how I sewed this one up. I shall leave it linked in the description box below. So now for this second example, I'm going to show how I create double darts at the side seam. So the first thing to do is to draw in where I want my new darts to be. So I'm measuring up from the waist 2 inches. That will be the position of the first dart. And then for my second, giving myself a little dot an inch above that 2-inch mark. Then connecting those dots with the apex. So that completes the position of my new darts. Now to give them some fullness. And that fullness is going to come from my shoulder dart. So cutting from the shoulder to the apex. And then from the side seam on my new dart lines to the apex. Then laying one of my shoulder dart legs over the other, making sure everything is nice and flat, and once I'm happy, sticking everything in place. And here, just making sure that both of my darts are the same size. And once I'm happy they are, sticking everything down. And I just have a couple more things to do to finish my darts. The first of which is to draw in the new point of my dart, which is what I'm marking here. So it's about 1 inch or so away from the apex. And I demonstrated this in a little bit more detail in my last beginner's patterning video, which again I shall link below. Drawing in my new dart legs, and then the final thing to do to complete this pattern is to fold out my darts and draw in my new side seam. So that completes example number 2 of my amended basic wrap bodice. And I use this same technique to create this pattern. I've uploaded a video on how I sewed this one up, which again I shall leave linked in the description box below. And then for this example, although not a wrap dress, I used the exact same technique to create these double darts, which is a little bit easier to see than that last example. This is another one I've uploaded a video on. Check the description box for links. So now for this last technique, I'm going to create tucks. So the first thing to do is to mark in where I want my tucks to be. And for this example, I'm going to measure on my waist dart line about halfway up. And then I don't want my tucks to come straight down. I want them to go at a little bit of an angle. So drawing in a diagonal line right across my marker there. And then measuring from the center 3/4 inches on either side. The position of the diagonal line and this measurement on either side is completely up to you. Have a play about with it, see what suits you best and what you like. Now drawing in the legs of my tucks, so connecting each of my dots straight down to the waist. And then at the top, connecting my dots to the apex. So that's the position of my tucks created. Now to give them the fullness. So to do that, I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did on the double darts before. I'm going to cut on each of my tuck lines from the waist to the apex. Close the shoulder dart. Once I'm happy everything is nice and flat, sticking it all down. Then measuring my tucks to make sure they're all the same size. And then to make sure that I sew to the right point, I'm going to pop in a mark just at the side of each of my tucks that corresponds to that original diagonal line we drew. And now the last thing to do is to fold out my tucks and draw in my new waistline. So that completes this third example. I have 3 tucks here, and I use this exact technique to create this pattern, and instead of the 3 tucks here, I've only used 2. I've uploaded a video on how I sewed this one up, which again I shall leave linked in the description box below. So I've shown how to create a very basic wrap dress pattern, how to remove the gape from the centre front, and then 3 examples of how you can change up this basic pattern to something a little bit more creative. So we had the gathers at the start, we then had the double darts, and you can use these techniques on any starting point. So instead of a wrap dress pattern, you could have a nice square neck like this one, or for the tucks in this example, you could start with a kimono base rather than starting with the standard woven base. So endless ways to get creative.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, please do, and I shall see you on Friday. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye, folks!